theology of the body, that great teaching of St. John Paul II that helps us to recognize what God intended for us in our creation as male and female and how that works. Last week we went back to the beginning, right? Christ appeals to the beginning. What was God's intention in creating us? And we saw that God created us, male and female, and called the two to become one in marriage as a sign that points to the community of love that is God, right? Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We are built and made for that communion of love with one another. And it's known right through our bodies. And we recognize that little line in Genesis, that they were naked without shame, right? We're like, what does that mean? But that they had no desire to use another as an object, but to give themselves. There's a gift of self that God created us for, this gift of self in love. Today, we cross that barrier of sin, and we move into what John Paul II calls the historical man. So that's original, and then this is historical. So from the advent of sin, and that first sin, to the resurrection, to the end of time, that's where we find ourselves now. How do we understand this? And John Paul II, using the words of Christ from the Sermon on the Mount, goes right to the heart of the matter. John Paul II quotes Jesus saying, "You've heard that it was said, 'Thou shalt not commit adultery.' But I say to you that one who looks at another with lust has already committed adultery in their heart." And really, the apostles themselves were like, what? Because we all know that's difficult, right? We do objectify others with the way we look at them at times and stuff. It's a struggle of fallen human nature, and Jesus takes it right on. Now, oftentimes we can convince ourselves, right, that, well, it's just the way I am. I've heard that. I've used that excuse, right? That's just the way I am. Nothing I can do about it. But Jesus is giving us hope here. He's not saying that to condemn anyone that experiences that in their own life, but to show us what God intends and how he will help us to even begin to experience something that was experienced in the beginning. That's why he brings it to the forefront, because it's not necessarily, it all comes from the heart, as he says later on, right? And so we have to allow him to redeem us. So one of the images that one of the speakers on Theology of the Body uses a lot, I like, because it's very, it makes it very evident what's going on. So we have in our mind and most Christians that are trying to live their faith think of those desires of your heart, right? They sometimes get out of control, they get out of whack, they go the wrong direction, and we think, as Christians, I gotta shove that down. I gotta repress those desires, right? Because they get me in trouble. I gotta repress them. And we'll call that the starvation diet, all right? So if we're gonna think of living in the body healthily, we'll use that image of eating. So we'll call that the starvation diet. But then the world, those who have given up on this if they ever tried it, or just say, indulge whatever desire you have. Do whatever makes you happy, right? And we'll call that the fast food diet, right? That's not going to end up well. You ever see that guy show who ate fast food for McDonald's for 30 days straight every meal? He almost died before the 30 days was up. So you got these two images. This is what this is all we think there is. These desires in my heart, which sometimes go the wrong direction and lead me in the wrong path, we think we either got to suppress them or repress them or indulge them. That's the only two options we got. Jesus is telling us there's a third option, redemption, right? No starvation diet, because eventually, if you go on the starvation diet, you're going to end up over here in the fast food. Because you can only take so much of that before you need a cheeseburger. And then if you're over here all the time, you're just going to be sick. Your body's going to die. And there's this middle ground that Jesus calls us back to so that we can experience redemption. Another way that I like to look at it is we got all these desires that God has given us. He created us with these desires. They're not bad in themselves, right? But sin twists them. They get twisted up and they get inverted. They point at ourselves, and things become about me. That's what sin does, right? Sin's always kind of revolving around me, myself and I, whatever I want. And what Jesus wants to do is redeem that. Now, here's the hard part, right? It's all difficult. But the hard part is letting him. We have this idea that I can't talk to God about these things that I struggle with. I can't talk to God about this messy thing. Or we have that puritanical view that the body's bad and sex is bad and all these things are bad, right? And none of that's true. It's all beautiful in God's image. It just needs to be lived rightly with the help of grace. That's why Jesus came, to redeem us, to transform it. But we have to invite him into it. Lord, I struggle with this thing. I know it's all twisted up. Untwist it for me. Redirect it, right? Instead of being inverted at myself, it can be redirected towards God, towards love of God and love of others in the correct way. And it's the energy, the power, the fuel that you see in the lives of the saints who are able to go out and do these great things for God. And it's because their desires have been redeemed. They've been transformed. They've been redirected in the right way. And it's really powerful. I mean, I've gone through much of these things in my life. I speak of these truths from experience, having been away from the church for 10 years, living a very worldly life, being all twisted up. And I'll tell you what, the world tells you you'll be happy with doing whatever you want, indulging it, right? You're not. All of us have experienced that in some way or another. You're not happy. You're miserable, as a matter of fact. It's like, this is it? This doesn't make me happy. I get moments of, like, pleasure or gratification, but there's not, like, the deep desire is not being fulfilled. What is going on here? And it's not until you see the beautiful vision that God has through redemption, through the redemption of our own bodies, through grace in Christ, that you can see, like, oh, this is what these desires are about. Lived rightly, they set us free to do good, to seek truth, and to see beauty, right? The beauty of another, not as an object to use, but as one to be loved for who they are, right? It's difficult. This prayer is very difficult. You will have trouble inviting the Lord into the messiness because we think we need to shield him from it or something. Like God's a Puritan or something. He's like, you don't think I see that mess in your life? Let me in there. I'm the one that does the cleaning, right? You can't do it on your own. That was precisely the apostles' response, and all those who heard Jesus, they were like, I give up if that's the thing. If it goes to the heart and even looking at someone in the wrong way is a sin, I'm in trouble. And Jesus is like, yes, you are. You need me, right? You need to let me into that so that I can transform it and I can redirect that. That it'd be the energy for you to live what I call you to, right? And we'll actually get into, in a future homily, how do you live this out? Because it's not just about marriage, but there are other ways to live this out, right? As my life points to. And we'll get to that. But in the meantime, we need to invite him into the messiness of our own hearts, to our struggles. Sometimes we can be overwhelmed by the fact that we can't seem to escape a struggle that we have. And we have to continually, it's a process, continually invite the Lord into that. Lord, you know these things are all twisted up, these desires that are twisted in my heart. Please begin to help me untwist them. Let them be directed to you, to love others as you called me to, in and through my body, not trying to escape my body and become some, like, sometimes we do that, right? Like, it's caused me all kinds of trouble. I just ignore it all, shove it over to the side. No, he wants to redeem it because he's going to use all that energy that comes from those desires to serve him. And it's powerful. It's difficult, though. But that's why he came. How does it happen? Well, through the beauty of the sacraments, confession, the Eucharist, of course, being filled with God's life, prayer, and beginning to live virtues, right? Those little ways each day that I choose to do what God calls me to. Here's something that helps. If you struggle with the precise thing that Jesus talks about, right, of looking at another lustfully, you turn it into a prayer as soon as you see it, right? As soon as you're tempted to see another person as an object, you immediately say, Lord, bless that person. Help me to see them as you do. And I guarantee you, you pray that prayer enough times, it begins to change you. It begins to redirect it. It begins to see where you can see another person as God's beautiful son or daughter. I mean, try looking at people like that. Like that, even the people that maybe you disagree with a lot or you don't necessarily care for, see them as God's son or daughter. It will change your own heart as you go through this process because the Lord wants to redeem us. He knows that we're broken, and he's not afraid of it. He's not afraid to get right in there in your messy room and start to clean it up and to really begin to set you free to see as he wants you to see and to live as God always desired us to live. We know that sin broke it, but that's why Jesus came, not to condemn us, but to invite us into redemption that will transform our own hearts so that we can begin to live the gospel to the full. Let's ask the Lord tonight, in this week, right? Lord, I know it could be all kinds of different desires. I know I got desires that are inverted. They're more directed at me. They're twisted up by sin, by the world that we live in, by my own sins, right? Lord, I invite you into this twisted mess of wires, right? What it looks like behind my television, right? And I ask you to organize them, redirect them, untwist them, and point them to you so that it can be that fuel of your love, so that I may love as you created me to.